G'day trendsetters, welcome to another episode of the Funk Wabi podcast. Today I'd like to talk about beauty, which is inspired by an Instagram account that I discovered recently. Been enjoying having my thoughts provoked by this person's account, which is titled The War on Beauty. In this, or through this account on YouTube channel, social media platform, Julia James Davis, I think is her name. Yes, that's right. Via her platform, Julia explores the degradation of beauty in our lives and what we can do to reinstate more beautiful surrounds, more beautiful living, more beautiful ways of life. And I largely agree with a lot of the things that she has to say and completely admire her drive, a shared passion to create more beauty in the world. Of course, through the way of tea, I'm trying to do the same bloody thing. But I don't know if we exactly agree on the ultimate way to get there, although the structure is largely shared. There's some particulars and some intricacies that I'd like to pick out throughout this podcast that hopefully become instructive about how beauty works in our lives, how we can create it for ourselves, and how we find it in the world or produce it in the world or live beauty. So to cut to the chase, the largest disagreement I have is Julia's answer to reinstating beauty in the West is to reinvigorate our passion for the Catholic Church. And I think, of course, this can be an answer, but it necessitates that everybody get on board with a particular view of the world and a particular practice. But I think that the pursuit of beauty in the way that we bring it into the world can come through a plurality of different practices that share the same underlying pillars. So, polish the floor, grab a tea, and tune in. Rotary ho, let's get stuck into it. I just mentioned that I think that Catholicism alone cannot be the only vessel that we should use towards beauty's restoration in our lives. But I'd like to start things off by going through one of the things that I think we are quite aligned on. And this is our shared interest in the philosophy of Friedrich Schiller. Now, I studied this guy a lot at uni. My professor, John Armstrong, who supervised my thesis on beauty, actually, was really big into Friedrich Schiller and his unique philosophy on the way beauty comes into our lives. And just on a side note, Friedrich Schiller has a beautiful bronze statue in the middle of Hanover. And Hanover is actually the sister city to Hiroshima. And there's a tea house there built by my teacher, the Grand Master of the Ueda Sokol tradition. And it's also sister cities with Poznan in Poland, near where my grandfather hails from. So all roads lead to Hanover. But seriously, Schiller's philosophy on beauty is quite unique. He picks up the thought that human beings have two main drives, two principal drives that govern our activity in the world. A sense drive and a form drive. So the sense drive is basically the satisfaction of our immediate desires. So going out and party, dancing, getting on the piss with your mates, having sex, all that wonderful stuff and things that we find stimulation from. Going listen to music, going to concerts, all that good stuff that we find great energy and emotional satisfaction from, immediate emotional satisfaction from. And the other drive is the form drive, which gives us meaning over time. So if we continue pursuing stimulation over and over again, without thinking about long-term consequences or any idea of threading those points of stimulation and emotional satisfaction together with some sort of overarching meaning, our lives quickly become empty. So, think about rock stars who live quite an iconic example of the life of immediate satisfaction of desire. Sex, drugs, rock and roll. So live fast, die young, which is basically saying you burn out after a life of satisfying your immediate desires. But we can structure a more meaningful life if we space it out over time by balancing with our form drive. So what gives things an overarching meaning can be, for instance, your religion. So if you structure the way that you live with an overarching sense of meaning you derived from your religious practice. Or it could be your working life, like going up to higher and higher levels in your work or your company can help give your life a sense of meaning over time, if you wish to put it in that, of course. Or your family, so seeing people grow up and mature, being through them with their trials and tribulations, can add a structure, an overarching structure to your life in which you can filter your sense drive and derive an overarching sense of meaning. So sense drive and form drive. We derive coherence, calm and unity through our form drive, and through our sense drive we get that intensity, that zest, the momentum and stimulus to keep pursuing richer and more meaningful ways of existing. And so if you have too much of the sense drive satisfaction, you risk burning out, like the live fast, die young, sex, drugs, rock and roll rock star. And if you have too much form or too much structure, you risk becoming quite dry and boring. So there's risks with fulfilling your life with too much of one. So to balance them, Schiller suggests quite a unique solution. He says the way that we balance both sense and form drive is through play. So in play, we have both rules and freedom combining to satisfy both the sense and form drives. And if you think about a game that has too many rules, it quickly becomes boring and too restrictive. But if there's too much freedom, it risks becoming chaotic and anarchic. And of course, when there's absolute chaos, that's one of the definitions of no meaning, when things are chaotic. So there needs to be a healthy balance in any game. And we find that, you think of the great games that people are very enthusiastic about, like different codes of football around the world, for example. There's always a healthy balance of the structure being the rules and the freedom through which people can play within those rules. So Schiller says, when we search for meaning, we are enacting our need for order or form. And when we are searching to satisfy a feeling, we are responding to the demand for life or sense. Schiller puts these two together through play, and through play we get something called living form. And Schiller's thesis is that beauty is nothing other than this living form. It's a pretty unique take on beauty, Friedrich Schiller. So balancing the form drive and sense drive is nothing other than living form, and living form is beauty. And the highest expression of this, he says, can be found in the art gallery. I don't know whether he would maintain that thesis today, but certainly in his period, a few hundred years ago, he maintained that the highest expressions of living form were found through art. And there's something in this idea about the harmonisation of form and sense. If we abstract these concepts a little bit more and think of form as the general and sense as the concrete particular, we can find parallels in other people's philosophy. When I was studying aesthetics at university, the philosophy of art at university, there was a couple of things that really struck out to me and changed my perspective on beauty. So when I was at university, of course, I'd already found the tea ceremony. I was already practicing tea. And through my pursuit of some of the more abstract philosophical concepts of beauty that you find in the Zen tradition and Japanese tea tradition, I was quite attracted to quite spacey things that were quite abstract and not really articulating very particular images and beautiful images, but more attracted to more wishy-washy things and thinking that those were holding ideals of beauty that were more profound than the concrete particular. So articulated characters in a novel or a beautifully evocative poem, for example. But when I was studying, my lecturer spoke one day about something that really changed my perspective on beauty. He used a quote by Martha Nussbaum, who's a philosopher, American philosopher, still alive. She said, perception, it's a bit hard going, so bear with me, I'll unpack it after. Perception is a process of loving conversation between rules and concrete responses, general conceptions and unique cases, in which the general articulates the particular and is in turn further articulated by it. The general is dark, uncommunicative, if it is not realised in a concrete image. But a concrete image or description would be inarticulate, in fact mad, if it contained no general terms. So what's some good examples of this? Well, the example that my lecturer used, he had two poems. One was a poem that illustrated the imagery in quite abstract general terms. And the other poem really got down into the particular examples describing very minute details about a person's relationship with nature. And the other one was quite an abstract natural poem. I haven't got them anymore, but I'll give you my own example. So, for instance, something that's dear to my heart, the Japanese tea ceremony. What are the abstract general terms at play? So, wabi-sabi, yugen. What's yugen? Yugen is like profundity. Transience, all these things like great, transience, woohoo, wabi-sabi, great. What's that? Well, if you're in the tea room and you enter through the small door and through the shadows in the alcove, you see just a single dewy flower, the bud of a single dewy flower in the alcove. And through that silence and the shadow is that glowing beacon of hope, a single promise of potential about to bloom in the world. Something like that is something that articulates the concept of wabi. So that closeness for natural processes and simplifying our need to complicate beauty, but stripping it all back just to that single flower is a good particular description, concrete image of wabi. Transience. So one of the things that's booming now in France, kintsugi. You have a broken tea bowl, but rather than discard it, you actually mend the scar on the bowl. And in the transience is actually made into something of beauty, capturing a concrete image of transience there in the repaired bowl by articulating the wound with gold repair. So transience can be magnified in that concrete particular and vice versa. We get to understand what transience is by meditating upon that piece that has been mended with kintsugi. So there's a lot to say in Martha Nussbaum's quote there that I think articulates how beauty works in the world. And this is backed up by a Japanese philosopher, Masao Kusanagi. He says, this is a little bit more metaphysically heavy, but he says being there, or things, existence, gains reality only within a relationship with transcendence, or the general. And transcendence acquires meaning as the reality of existence only within its relationship with being there. So he's echoing Nussbaum's idea that it's the interplay of the general and the concrete particular through which things find their meaning. Of course, the general and the concrete particular are echoing the form drive and the sense drive and the interplay through play. And funnily enough, I think the Japanese tea ceremony is a bloody good example of living form. When I was at uni, I would clash with my supervisor all the time because he didn't particularly care for the Zen arts and tea ceremony and these concepts of beauty that I was trying to talk about through my thesis. He was more interested in Western images of beauty and things that were at play in Western concepts of the beautiful. And I think finally, after thinking about this podcast and what it is that I have small issue with, but still issue with the War on Beauty Instagram account, is something that I wish I was able to talk about with my lecturer all those years ago. And it's a lack of spaciousness or stillness or silence through which is articulated other rare forms of beauty which we find in the Zen arts. So basically today is me trying to find my way to get there and unpack the thinking process towards this missing concept of silence and stillness. It's not altogether missing, but can be ignored a little bit as opposed to what it is in the Japanese arts, traditional arts and Zen arts. So for me, beauty is not all saints and cathedrals and sumptuousness and gorgeousness. There's something to say about vacuity and space and stillness, void, absence, the abstract. I think there's a great need for this too, both the beautifully articulated concrete image, but also that sense of spaciousness you get from emptiness and nothingness, that of course is wonderfully articulated in the Zen arts. So to give you an example of this is one of my favourite places in the entire world, which is Saint-Baume, which is just over there, the mountain range, the Massif de la Saint-Baume, is where Mary Magdalene found her way after the death of Jesus. So after Christ's crucifixion, to escape her own persecution, potential persecution by the Romans, got in a boat and fanged it out through the Mediterranean to France and found her way to a cave on this mountain range. And it's been turned into, well, they call it a grot, but grot or grotto, but it's sort of been given a bit more religious vigour with stained glass windows, the altar, there's 2 rows of pews, no more, probably 3 or 4 rows of pews in there, the seats that you sit on, those bench seats that you sit on in a church. Beautiful marble statues decorating different points of the church or the cave, but still it maintains the roof, of course, is the cave. There's beautiful spring water out the back where pilgrims can go fill up their drink bottle after a hike. It's delicious for tea, and the addition of all this imagery and Catholic idolatry is a beautiful addition to this natural cave. Of course, with the profound history being that Mary Magdalene is supposed to have meditated there in ecstasy 7 times a day. Anyway, be that as it may, if you walk a little bit further down across the mountain range, you come to another cave, which is very well hidden, but nonetheless is there, called the Grotte or the Cave of Eggs. And funnily enough, it's shaped like a vagina, and there's nothing in there. It's just totally sparse, and you have to be quite a dedicated pilgrim to go down in there. The association with Christianity is only the immediate association it is with the cave of Mary Magdalene. But otherwise, I guess even before Christianity arrived in the region, it would have been a site where different practices happened. It's quite a naturally conducive site to pursue something deeper and meaningful. Anyway, but people go in there, and down the back is a place where sunlight does not reach. You need quite a lot of courage to go in there. But if you can muster the courage and go in there and sit in meditation, the experience is quite profound. Very beautiful serene atmosphere. You feel very safe, even though it can be quite scary before you get to that point. And the quality of meditation and tea practice that I've done also in that cave has been so inspiring that I carry these memories and carry this sense of stillness with me in my tea practice today. So on the one hand, you have two forms of beauty, both deeply moving. One, the sumptuousness, the gorgeousness of stained glass windows, marble statues, iconography in the altar. The Benedictine monks look after the grot these days, and they're often in there singing those beautiful hymns and sound, absolutely gorgeous, the haunting sounds in the cave, with the beautiful imagery of the stained glass windows, the entrance, the satisfaction of having climbed there, looking at the scenery. Everything is just absolutely jaw-droppingly beautiful. But then there's equal depth and profundity if you walk down through the forest and go to a totally unadored natural hole in the rock. There's something about that place too that really touches the heart very deeply. And I think what unites them is this sense of stillness, but they're qualitatively different. The stillness in the grot of Mary Magdalene is rich with religious suggestion. But the stillness or the silence that you get at the Cave of Eggs is just pure void. There's nothing in there except which you take in. And of course, for the aesthetics or the pilgrims that go there, often they're looking to shed away everything, drop everything, to go and be totally void, nothing, naked, not literally, but you know what I mean, in this place, searching for a profundity beyond their concepts and images and religious idolatry. And there's something here, I don't know if I can articulate it, but there's something here that knits in another quote that goes beyond those of Nussbaum and Kusanagi before, which is one that comes from Murdoch, another person which I studied at university in the same course, Philosophy of Art. And Murdoch has a ripper quote that comes from her book Metaphysics as a Guide to Morals. And she says, reality, including the reality of our human lives, paraphrasing her a bit there, reality, including the reality of our human lives, is unfinished and full of blankness and jumble. Isn't that great? Our reality, including the reality of our human lives, is unfinished and full of blankness and jumble. There's a great admission of that in the Zen arts. A lot of the things are unfinished. Thus we allow warped and disfigured forms in tea and try and find beauty in these forms as equally as perfect forms. But there are aspects of Christian practice, and especially Christian mysticism, that allow these ideas too. But just to give a quick example about this unfinished blankness and jumble, I think one of the greatest artworks I've seen that articulates this very well, of course you have classic works like King Lear, for example, can just harrowing like tragedies at the end. But a recent example, one that I'll never forget, is a movie that I've seen once, will only ever see once because I cannot endure it ever again, but I am very happy that I did endure it, was Dancer in the Dark, starring Björk. It's one of the most harrowing experiences I've ever had in my entire life, and it scarred me forever, and I'm thankful of these scars. If you haven't seen it, bloody watch it, but don't say I didn't warn you. You'll thank me, but you'll hate me for it, if you get what I mean. Sometimes the meaning is that there is no meaning. And this movie articulates that very, very well. One person, one religious figure, a Catholic religious figure, a Christian mystic, who I have an infinite amount of respect for and currently a little bit obsessed with, is St. John of the Cross, who echoes this sentiment very well in his writing and the experiences that are still relevant to our lives now, hundreds of years after his life. St. John of the Cross was in Spain. He was persecuted for his beliefs, and he was locked up he's in solitary confinement, pretty shit situation, like in the heat of summer, like the clothes rotting on his body, starving, still wouldn't give up his pursuit for truth. But during his incarceration, he got to the point where he started to feel God was abandoning him. Total vacuity, totally alone, no meaning, nothing. And through that nothing, he actually found a fullness that he could never imagine. And the epiphany that he had was nothing, nothing, nothing. Totally abandoned, no hope. Still, there's a richness and fullness there that cannot be described and supplies life with infinite meaning. And some of the poetry that he articulated, his most famous work being The Dark Night of the Soul, articulates this struggle with nothing, absence, void, but yet finding something so rich, beautiful and meaningful that it was worth all that hardship that he endured. This approach to finding God is termed in the Christian tradition via negativa. So via or voir is the way, michi like sado, the way of tea, kado, the way of flowers, kodo, the way of incense, the via, voir, and negativa, it's negative, so the way of negation. So you negate things in order to get to the ultimate truth. And this is almost exactly what Zen does. Empties, 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 until nothing remains, and in nothingness, we find the ultimate truth, the emptiness, the great mu, or nothing, or absence, void, nothingness, however you'd like to translate mu. Usually mu just stays as mu. Someone just joined and probably think I'm a cow. One of the big epiphanies that I've had by thinking about what's the fine intricacies of difference that I have when I'm listening to the War on Beauty podcast or Instagram reels is this articulation of silence as like an open ground for different traditions to converge. So, of course, St. John of the Cross was a Christian, but it's also very, very similar, if not almost the same, as where different Zen practitioners have got to. Of course, they would lose the term God, but they would still use a term like mu or something to express that ultimate reality that they find, that fullness that enriches them when they have finally broken through into nothingness. And there's this ground here of stillness and silence that other traditions, not just Zen, but other religious or art traditions can find a way in to bring more beauty into the world and their lives. So it's not exclusively the Catholic Church through which we should strive to bring beauty into the world. I think it's other things that share this sense and this value for silence, stillness, this void, nothing, through which we can find plenitude, paradoxically. And the second big epiphany that I had is that to get intimate with stillness and silence, we need to have a practice. So my first pillar for beauty, the first condition I think for beauty, to bring it into the world is that you need to have a practice which structures your life. So this is very similar to Schiller's form drive. And why I put this as my first pillar these days, it might change over time, but I think today we're being bombarded with so much stimulation through the internet, our mobile phones, smartphones, all our devices and crap that we carry around with us. Every time that we have a moment of silence or stillness, or potential moment of silence or stillness, there's almost a habitual pattern that's emerging now where people are reaching for their phone, rather than waiting on the train platform and just, looking around and enjoying the ambience of the train platform. People want to escape that moment of stillness or silence or alone time, quiet time, by reaching for their bloody phone and getting a dopamine hit from Instagram or something. And so now more than ever, I think there's a great battle to reinstate a practice through which we get meaning in our life over time, rather than filling our lives with momentary stimulation. So practice is really important, and if you have a solid practice, whether it be the practice of tea, whether it be the practice of incense, flowers, whether it be your religion, your the Catholicism, to take it back to the war on beauty, to have that central practice in your life is something through which you can see these moments of stillness and silence arise and get the value from them, because you have that overarching form in your life. And this practice, what's necessitated is not to hide behind a particular tradition. There has to be an active grappling with it, a questioning. So there's self-cultivation going on. So this self-cultivation is what I'm talking about when we're talking about practice. So through tea, you don't just blindly follow the form. There's an active grappling with these forms, seeing whether they still fit and are still ripe for our times today, or whether they need to be slightly modified or adapted in order to fit the different cultures where we are. There's an active grappling, and through that we get trials, and self-cultivation emerges through our practice. So we've got a living practice through which we find grounding and continuity. And the moments of stillness and silence that we get to enjoy in our lives are magnified because of our practice. The second pillar I'm already talking about is silence. So I think this is the one thing missing from Schiller's view. You have the form drive and the sense drive, but that emptiness behind it is not there in his view. He adds on play or art. There's still that filling. There's no sense of emptying, but I think one of the things that can bring other traditions in to ignite the world with images of beauty, bring more beauty into our everyday life, is if we allow one of the pillars of beauty to be silence or stillness practice. It can be more of a pluralistic way to unite shared values towards bringing more beauty into our surrounds and lives. And then you have practice or self-cultivation, stillness or silence, and then the third pillar is the poetical, which is kind of loosely aligns with the sense drive. So how to knit form and emptiness together in interesting ways where it's articulated to you and other people. So there can be just that. You can articulate it through poems. So having general terms intertwined with concrete particulars. Describing what's one of Basho's poems, where he talks about silence and the cicada's shrill penetrating the ancient rock. So silence, a vague and general term, but articulating what silence means by saying a concrete image immediately after being the cicada's shrill penetrating the ancient rock or the old rock. What a way to illustrate silence. So these things, the concrete in particular, expressed poetically by joining disparate elements of your experience, and of course this is quite paradoxical, silence articulated by a deafening shrill of cicada, but in that ancient rock, suggesting something that goes beyond just a dictionary definition of silence, really enlivens your experience, opening up to all different elements. And to unpack that alone would take another podcast. But these three things, practice, silence, and the poetical. So these three things in play to bolster Schiller's form and sense drive with stillness or silence practice is a way to bring more beauty into our lives and the world, which at the same time opens it up beyond the Catholic Church to other traditions that may participate in these three pillars. It's quite generally applicable. It's not all cool and novel. There's some more timeless, deeper themes that we can bring out through what we experience in moments of silence and stillness. So one of the things I wrote down in preparation, just to bring that all together, is that together practice, silence and the poetical generate harmony and open up a space for beauty. So just to finish off, I'd like to end with two quotes from St. John of the Cross, which I think bring everything together, as well as give a hat tip back to the original stimulus for the podcast, being the war on beauty and the thesis that the Catholic Church is the way to beauty. Here's something that brings everything I've been talking about together. It is great wisdom to know to be silent and to look at neither the remarks, nor the deeds, nor the lives of others. It is great wisdom to know how to be silent and to look at neither the remarks, nor the deeds, nor the lives of others. And the second quote, to reach satisfaction in all, desire its possession in nothing. To come to the knowledge of all, desire the knowledge of nothing. To come to possess all, desire the possession of nothing. To arrive at being all, desire to be nothing. So I think that's a nice way to end this discussion and investigation into how beauty works in the world and how we can bring more of it into our lives and societies and the world around us. Thank you very much to Miss Julia James Davis, bringing the war on beauty into our lives via Instagram and other social media platforms. So thank you very much for listening. If you would like to support my activities further, you can sign up to my Patreon, paid or free. If you'd like to get some tea or the Pearl Among the Clouds book, you can get that from my website. If you'd like to learn the way of tea, you can send me a message via my website. And thank you again for listening. Have a beautiful day. Funk Wabi.